here from Plans Meet Paper, and today I wanted to come on and film a video telling you about Nolan Andrews' birth story. So I am 1 month postpartum today, and Nolan is 1 month old, and I finally got a day where I don't have any visitors, and I actually got myself put together and the baby's sleeping at the same time. Well, for the moment at least. So I wanted to come on and film this video and tell you guys how Nolan came into the world. I wanted to also say thank you so much for all the support and encouragement and prayers that my subscribers, all of you guys, have been giving me throughout the last couple months of my pregnancy and this new transition into being a mom. It means so much to me, and it really has encouraged me and kept me going on some of those sleepless nights this first month. And so thank you so much for all of your thoughts and prayers. So first off, I did take a few notes here in my planner, as per usual, just to make sure that I tell the whole story and don't leave out any of the details for you guys about how Nolan arrived. So I'll start at the beginning. Nolan was born on February 5th, 2019, and he was 2 weeks early, so he was a surprise. He was Breech, and then he had been Breech since like 30 weeks, since they started even calling it Breech. So he had always been head up, bum down, pretty much in the same spot where he had his head like right underneath my ribs and then his legs and butt down at the bottom. So that's how he was positioned. And on February 5th, it was a Tuesday morning, at about 3 a.m., I was laying awake in bed, which was typical for me at that time. I was always awake right around that time just because I was uncomfortable being 38 weeks pregnant. I had really bad rib pain, and so from like 2 to 4 in the morning, I could never sleep those last couple weeks. And so as per usual, I was laying there awake in bed, and all of a sudden, there was a massive amount of liquid in bed. And I am not even exaggerating, it was a lot. It was like gallons, I feel like. Probably like 1.5 gallons of liquid or more, like instantly in my bed. Luckily, I did have a like shower curtain down underneath my sheets that I had put on several weeks before, because my mom's water actually broke in the middle of the night with her first child, and so she told me, you should put a shower curtain down just in case, and I'm so glad I did, because otherwise it would have probably ruined our mattress. And so I'm laying there, middle of the night, all of a sudden, no warning, I had no symptoms throughout the day, no symptoms that night, all of a sudden I'm drenched, and it was like I could feel liquid coming out, but I couldn't stop it. I've heard before that when your water breaks, you hear like a pop, or there's some other things that people say that happen beforehand, like your mucus plug comes out or other things like that. None of those things happened. It was just drenched, instant drenched. And in that moment at 3 in the morning, I was not thinking super rationally. And I'm laying there and I'm like, Kevin, that's my husband's name. I'm like, either my water just broke or I peed my pants really bad and I'm still currently peeing my pants and I can't stop. Not sure which one it is. And Kevin's like, okay, I think your water broke. And I'm like, I don't know. I was just freaking out. I was kind of in denial. I mean, it is true that when you're really pregnant at the end, things don't quite feel the same, and there are possibilities for peeing your pants. But if I was thinking rationally, I would have realized, like, why am I still going if I'm awake and consciously thinking about this, first off. Second, also, I had just gone to the bathroom like 20 minutes before, and this was so much fluid, there's no way that it was pee at this point. But I was not rational in that moment, and I was kind of in denial and convinced that like it could be either, I don't know. And I was like, well, either way we have to go to the hospital and get checked out and make sure that everything's okay. So we get out of bed. Kevin immediately goes to take our dog out. because he is more rational than me, and he's like, okay, this is happening, we're going to the hospital, I'm not sure how long it'll be or when someone's going to be able to make it over here to take care of our dog. So he goes to take the dog out, give him a quick walk, get him fed, everything he needs, and I'm like calling triage. Well, Kevin was still here at that time, but I call the hospital and I tell them, I think my water broke, I'm not sure, I'm a first-time mom, and I told them that my baby was Breech, or at least he was a couple hours ago when I felt his head up at the top. I couldn't feel his head at that moment anymore. It's like he shifted, and so I was kind of concerned with that too. He wasn't moving, and I was like, okay, I can't feel his head anymore. He was Breech a couple hours ago. How fast do I need to come into the hospital? Should I wait? Should I rush in? You know, what's the protocol here? And they said, well, probably come pretty quick if he's Breech. So we finished things up quickly and we headed straight out to the hospital around 3:30 in the morning. Our hospital is about half an hour away, so by the time that we got there, it was around 4 a.m. in the morning. Also, I will note that while we were in this whole chaos of me being in denial about my water breaking, Kevin being a little bit more rational and still nervous and excited too, he texted both of our families, like everyone in our families, Amy's water just broke, we're going to the hospital, looks like today is baby day. He texted them all, and I get this text message too. I'm on the group message, and I'm like, Kevin, what if I just peed the bed and you just told everyone in both of our families? Because I'm gonna have to tell them that if my water didn't break. And he's like, that's not what happened, it's fine. But I was all freaking out about that too in the moment. We did have our bags packed and everything, so that made it pretty smooth to get out the door in a timely manner and make it to the hospital. So that's what's going on. It was 4 a.m. when we arrived at the hospital, and just to paint the scene for you here, I live close to Seattle in Washington, and we never get snow here. And this week in February was the snowiest week in like several years of history. It was being called Snowmageddon. It was like this crazy snowstorm all week long. It started the Monday before Nolan was born. So the roads getting to the hospital were not great. Luckily, my husband and I are from Colorado where it snows all the time. And so we're pretty used to driving in the snow, and we do have a four-wheel drive car, so it was a smooth ride. But it did add a little bit of anxiety to it that the roads were really bad, and it had snowed all day, which just never happens, and so everything was really icy here in Washington. But we did arrive safely, and although as I mentioned previously, there was like gallons of water in our bed, and then, you know, as I had gotten ready and stuff, there had been more water coming out, amniotic fluid. By the time we got to the hospital, I was still just like, there was so much fluid coming out. I think I just must have had a ton of amniotic fluid. I was like soaked through the pads and things that I was wearing, and it was literally like pooling in my shoes. It was so gross, and I was so embarrassed. We're walking in on the snow and the ice, and it's 4 in the morning, and I'm like, Kevin, my pants are wet and my shoes are full of water. I'm so embarrassed. And he's like, Amy, you look super pregnant. It's 4 a.m. in the morning. I'm pretty sure people are gonna know what happened. And I'm like, yeah, but oh, this is so embarrassing. And we go into triage and tell them that we think my water broke, and they do a little like strip test to test if it actually is amniotic fluid. And as soon as she, you know, touched the fluid with this strip, she's like, oh yeah, that's definitely amniotic fluid. You are here to stay. So that calmed my worries about the peeing of the pants thing. But it was also funny because the triage nurse, who by the way was great, all of our doctors and nurses were so good. We had really great experience, so we felt very blessed by that. But she was really funny. We walk in, she tests the fluid, and she's like, okay, so here's the deal. You're here in labor and delivery, and you're gonna have a baby, so congratulations. But go ahead and just say goodbye to your dignity it is gone for today. So just wrap your head around that. And I was like, okay. I am pretty conservative and pretty, you know, I like to hold close to my dignity most of the time. And so that was kind of broke the ice and helped me to let go, because that definitely is necessary. Whether you're having a baby naturally, by C-section, anyway, you've got no dignity, so just accept it from the beginning. But around then, once we got checked in, we stayed in triage for about 2 hours. So from 4 a.m. to around 6 a.m., we met the doctor. The OB that was going to be doing the C-section, she did have to do an ultrasound to check that he was still in the breech position, and he was. They did put all the monitors on and check his heart rate, and he was doing just fine. While I was in triage, they did also have monitors on me to check for contractions, and they did say that I was contracting all throughout that time. I was having contractions, and I didn't really feel them. I was pretty lucky about that. I really feel like I only felt like one contraction. So as far as pain for that part of the day, I really didn't have it bad at all. So I was super lucky with that. And Nolan was doing just fine. His heart rate was steady the whole time, so that really helped me to relax when I was kind of nervous and stressed in that moment. And my husband was great. He was there, you know, through it all, and much calmer than me. So I give all the props to him for that. Also in triage, we met several nurses. There was just kind of a revolving door of people coming in and like checking all the lady parts and the belly and everything. It, you know, dignity was gone already. And then also they were starting to prep me for surgery. I did have to wait a while for the surgery. Like I said, we were there for like 2-3 hours before the surgery started, which was totally fine with us. There were other people who were in active labor and in pain, and so those people were getting their what is it called? Spinal block things first. So we were totally fine with that. Fine with waiting. One thing I will let you know, if you end up having a C-section, whether it's scheduled or not scheduled like ours ended up being, they do have you drink, or at least if it's not scheduled. I had dinner the night before, and I had also drank water throughout the night, and so my stomach was not empty for the surgery. And since it was not empty and I had to have the surgery anyways, they did have me take this shot of this medicine that neutralizes your stomach acid, and I was not aware that that was a thing. And the nurse, again, she was really funny. She's like, oh, just toss it back like your favorite shot. And I was like, okay. So I do. And it was the nastiest thing I have ever drank in my life. I was not prepared for it. It was literally like drinking bleach. It was horrible, which makes sense. If it's going to neutralize stomach acid, then it has to be super basic on the pH scale to cancel it out. So it pretty much was bleach. But it was horrible. So just be prepared for that if you do have to have a surprise C-section, that you might have to take that shot of nasty. But it goes down. It makes your mouth taste super bad for the whole C-section, and you're not allowed to have any gum or anything like that after. So that was a little unfortunate, but it's all good. And so once we were all prepped and headed back to the OR, I walked on back, and my husband was all in his bunny suit, ready to go back as well. He could not go back right away. It was just me to start. And as soon as I got in the room, they did have me go ahead and strip down, and they went for the spinal block right away. It was literally like 3 seconds after I'd been in the room, they were doing the spinal block. And I was very, very nervous about that. If you've been following me in my pregnancy journey, you might have known that before I found out my son was Breech, I was planning on trying to do a natural delivery. And that's mostly because the thought of anything going in my spine really freaks me out. I was very nervous about it, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. It was not painful, at least not bad at all. Just like a little pinch, no big deal. And it kicked in amazingly fast. Like literally within a second of him putting it in, it was like, whoa, I can't hardly like lay down, I couldn't feel my body from like my chest down. So the nurses immediately like grab you and lay you down on the table. It kicked in super, super hard and fast for me. So there I am in the operating room. As I mentioned before, dignity is gone. So you're totally, you know, out there, no clothes on. They're like scrubbing down your stomach with these iodine sponge things. There's all these other people like surgical techs and doctors in the room. Kevin still wasn't back there yet, so I'm just by myself. Your arms are like straight out in like a T shape and you're just on this narrow little table in a really bright room. And it was pretty nerve-wracking for me. I've never had a surgery before, and it was so early in the morning. I just was not fully mentally prepared for it. And so I was a little spastic. I was crying. I was very excited to meet my son, but just scared about the procedure and everything. And as soon as Kevin was able to come back, I did feel a lot better. And actually I felt better too once they put up the drape that kind of separates my face from the rest of my body. Like they put it right around here. I don't know why, but even though I wasn't like covered up with clothes, the fact that I couldn't see that I wasn't covered up with clothes made me feel a little bit better. And so that helped, and when Kevin came, that helped a lot as well. The surgery went well. I think at the beginning it went super smooth. The anesthesiologist was sitting right next to my head, and I remember asking him at one point after the doctors had arrived, I don't know, like 10-15 minutes before, probably 10 minutes, it was really fast. And I wasn't even sure if they were starting yet or anything. They didn't really do any like testing, like poking me to test if I could feel anything, or at least not that I could tell. Maybe they did and I couldn't feel it, which is why they started. But I remember asking him, like, are we gonna start soon? What's going on? And he said, oh yeah, they're halfway through your uterus right now. Your baby's gonna be born in about a minute or two. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was very weird feeling totally disconnected from the rest of your body, like having no sensation whatsoever. I know some people say they can feel like pressure and tugging and that kind of thing. And I didn't feel that. I just didn't feel anything, which, I mean, I was okay with overall. It was just very odd being separated so fully from the rest of your body. But so far the surgery had gone well, and they did start taking Nolan out, and my husband was watching. He has like a really solid stomach, so he felt totally comfortable watching the surgery, and the doctors were fine with that. So he's watching as they're taking Nolan out, and he said it was all going well. And then as soon as they started to get his head out, my uterus actually like contracted and clamped down really, really hard on his head and entrapped his head, and they could not get it out for several minutes. And the doctors, he said, were super professional, but you could tell like they were concerned. This was not normal. They were like putting a serious amount of force trying to get the baby out. And it was really scary because while this was all going on, the baby was totally like blue, not moving, not breathing. His actual his like mouth and his eyes and his face were out. It was just like the top of his head that got stuck really bad that my uterus just clamped down on. And so it was really scary for Kevin. I didn't know exactly what was going on because I couldn't see or feel anything. And of course, they're not telling me in the moment that, you know, something bad is happening. That wouldn't be good for the person lying on the table. But I could kind of sense that something was off because it just felt very serious in the room, and the doctors were, you know, very, very focused. And Kevin was starting to look a little white, which I was getting nervous about. And so, you know, things were a little funky there. Luckily, one of the doctors that was doing the surgery was forceps trained, which I guess nowadays a lot of OBs are not forceps trained. They don't really do that very much anymore. They usually use like vacuum suction, but very luckily she was forceps trained and she was able to get his head out with forceps. which I guess is super, super uncommon to have to do that in a C-section, because usually they just pull the baby right out, but my uterus was not cooperating. Apparently it wanted to hold on to my baby boy for a little bit longer. But it was very lucky that she was able to do that, because otherwise they would have had to cut a much larger incision and do like a T-shaped incision to get his head out, which would have meant a lot longer recovery for me, and also would have meant that I would have no chance of ever having a vaginal delivery in the future if I were to have more kids in the future. So I was really blessed that there was a doctor that was trained there to do forceps, and she was able to get him out safely with the forceps. Unfortunately, again, while this was all going on, the head entrapment that lasted like 3 or 4 minutes, the baby was like put into total shock. And so right after he was born, they immediately rushed him over to like the corner of the room that had the warmer and all the supplies and everything for the baby. And unfortunately, right at that moment, he had an APGAR score of 1. So right when babies are born, they do assess them on something called an APGAR scale. And basically what it's testing for is like their appearance, their response, like whether or not they cry or jerk away, their movement, their heart rate, and their breathing. Those are the things that it monitors for. And usually they want to see a score, I think, like above 6 or 7 for babies to be considered healthy at birth. And he had an APGAR score of 1. So it was really, really scary. My husband, like I said, this was much more scary for him because he could see it all, and he was right there with Nolan while it was happening. He went over to that part of the room too. They said that that was okay for him to go as well. But he was totally like gray blue. He was not moving. He was not breathing. He was not showing any sort of response or crying. The only point that he got on the APGAR scale was for a heart rate, and he had a really, really low heart rate. So that's why he only got a 1 out of 2 for heart rate. So that was really scary. But they did give him some compressions and rescue breaths, and within 2-3 minutes, he scored an APGAR score of 8. So it was, you know, just this crazy couple of minutes where he got stuck, the head entrapment happened, the baby went into shock. He basically was showing hardly any signs of life, very scary. My husband said he totally looked like a stillborn, which was very, very terrifying for him. But the nurses and the staff were so great, so professional, and they knew exactly what they were doing. And within 2 minutes, he was pink, crying, responding, everything, just doing way, way better. So we felt so blessed that we were in the right place with the right people taking care of us and taking care of our baby. And so we just thank God for that. But that's basically how he came into the world. The hospital was great. As soon as he was, you know, considered stable, he got warmed up. He was breathing and responding appropriately. They did go ahead and bring him over just a couple minutes later and put him on my chest, and I was able to see him and talk to him and do skin to skin with him while I was still having my surgery. So the whole time that they were stitching me up and closing and everything, I was able to be holding him, or at least have him on my chest. My arms were still out, so it was kind of awkward. But it was so great to be able to have him, you know, right over my heart, and to have that time immediately after birth with him. So far, now he is a month old. We did have a couple days in the hospital there right after he was born. We did 2 nights in the hospital, 2 hours in recovery, and Nolan was doing great. I was doing well, so they let us go home. And now we've been home for a couple weeks, and we're both still doing well. So that is my birth story. It was a little crazy, a little scary, but you know, definitely an experience we won't forget, and we're just so glad that we've got our baby boy, that he's healthy and happy and doing well. And one thing I will say is, if you're in your final weeks of pregnancy and things just aren't going as planned, as I mentioned, he was breech. I was hoping to do a natural delivery, so I was kind of disappointed about that. But things worked out exactly how they needed to. The doctors did let me know after the surgery when I was in recovery that Nolan has a like 85th, 90th percentile head. He has a really big noggin, and my pelvis structure, at least for this pregnancy, it was like way too narrow. So they said there was no way that his head was going to fit through my pelvis. No matter, you know, if it shifted a little bit during delivery like they usually do, they said it wouldn't have happened, that he would not have fit through my pelvis. Also, the cord was wrapped around his neck a couple times, and so they said, you know, that happens sometimes, that babies are breech for a reason. It's like the baby knows that it's not going to go well, and so they stay head up for a reason. And so that was definitely the case for me, and I am so glad that I was able to have him through C-section, and that the doctors were so well trained and the nurses and staff were so well trained. So just trust in the process. Trust that God's got a plan for you and your family, and everything's going to be okay one way or another. So I just wanted to give you that encouragement. If you're in your last couple weeks of pregnancy and feeling nervous or things aren't going as planned, it's all going to be good, and pretty soon here you'll have your little bundle of joy. So that is the story of how Nolan Andrew arrived here in the world. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing it. Again, thank you so much for your support throughout this journey, and I will be sure to get filming and posting videos again here pretty soon. I know I've been slow the last couple weeks, I've been in baby land, just enjoying this time, and I'm sure I will still be kind of doing that off and on for the next couple months, but I will do my best to film and post and keep you guys updated on how things are going with Nolan as well. So thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.